Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the Culture Study Podcast. We want to help more people find the show because it's our listeners that make this thing so interesting and fun. There are 4 ways to support the show that don't cost any money. You can send it to a friend, you can post it on social media, you can follow it, like press the follow button in your podcast app, or you can leave a nice review in the app. Word of mouth is still the #1 way people find new podcasts, so it really, really helps us when you spread the word. And if you want to support the show with your dollars, join the crew of paid subscribers at patreon.com/culturestudy. Paid subscribers get ad-free episodes, private discussion threads, bonus content in every single episode, plus whole bonus episodes every now and then. Just a heads up, we do have a bonus episode in the works about the new Wuthering Heights movie. So again, it's patreon.com/culturestudy to sign up. Okay, thanks. On with today's show. Hi, everyone. This is the Culture Study Podcast, and I'm Anne Helen Petersen.
And I'm Colin Gorey, linguist and the author of the Dead Language Society Substack.
So, Colin, we were talking before we started recording about how both you and I are, what's the right word here? I don't like using like refugee from the ivory tower. I also don't love escape because I didn't escape so much as like there was no space in the ivory tower. We both used to be within academia, and now we are no longer technically within academia, but still very devoted to our discipline. So you've said, and this is kind of your mission, is to bring linguistics to a larger audience and talking to people about how language works, specifically how older language worked and continues to work in the way that we speak today. So how did you get interested in this? How did you become a word nerd?
My fate was sealed at a very young age when I saw this gigantic shelf of books, Encyclopedia Britannica. My parents had probably bought from some sort of a traveling salesman.
Totally,
Back in the 70s or something. And I opened up to the very first page and I saw that there was a discussion of the letter A. And, at this point I was pretty young. I had my command of all 26 letters, but I was thrilled to learn that they actually had a history. Like, these letters didn't just pop out of the ether and just fully formed as we have them today. The letter A had a history. It had origins in the Greek alphabet and the Phoenician alphabet. And there I was, this young kid, Greek alphabet? What do you mean Greek alphabet? There's only one alphabet, right? Phoenician.
Right,
What is it?
right.
I didn't know how to pronounce Phoenician at the time. So I was like, right. Okay, let's look this up. And then, my fate was sealed from then.
I did such a nerdy project in elementary school on different calendars. And like that, I think there's something revelatory when you're a kid about decentering, like the way that we organize the world. Like when you first have that realization, like, oh, there are different ways that people have understood time, or people have understood how language is amassed, that it's hard to get our brains around them. But then you can spend the rest of your life trying to get your brain around it.
You can. It's sort of like the moment as a child when you learn that your grandmother's your mom's mom. And wait a second, how does that? So you're telling me, but it's similar for language. You learn all of these little words that you're using and that you say without thinking actually came from somewhere and had sometimes a very, very interesting history.
Yes.
And you start to look at your own way of speaking, which might seem perfectly natural, as something strange and something that you actually might want to examine and might have to examine.
Yeah.
And I think that's a healthy experience for a young mind.
What questions do you get? Like, I used to always, when I told people that my PhD was in media studies, people would be like, what's your favorite movie? So what questions do you get? What are the interesting and not so interesting questions that you get?
So the big question for linguists is, how many languages do you speak? But when someone asks that, they should be prepared, because then the answer is always, well, now it's very interesting because you have to understand that, the boundaries of what means to for a language to be a language, very hard to define, and the language versus dialect, and what does it mean to speak, and blah, blah. And then they scuttle off and realize that they shouldn't have asked.
Right. Or you could be like, dead languages or living languages, languages that I can read or languages that I know how to speak. Like, it's very, how can I ask you that question though?
Yeah, I can't really answer it. I dabble in a lot, but I have my languages that are sort of more my specialty. And the biggest one for me these days is Old English, which I'm sure will come up a bunch. It's hard to talk about the history of English without talking about Old English, but it's sort of the earliest written phase of the English language from around, say, 600 to 1100.
Yeah.
So I teach this day to day. I sort of write Neo-Old English textbooks and things like that. So I'm immersed in that phase of the English language, which is quite different from English as we speak today. But then I have all my other, I'm really into Sanskrit as well. Yeah. Too many languages.
No,
Most of them dead.
I find it so like with different alphabets too, and different ways of describing like places that I've gone in the world where the alphabet, like, in like the Greek alphabet, there's some familiarity that you can kind of parse it out in your brain very slowly. But then, like, I was in Myanmar, and the complete dislocation of not knowing, like, having no cipher, essentially, like just being like, here are a ton of words, and I have no way of knowing how to interpret any of these words. I think it's, in some ways, it was very useful. It was very clarifying, but it's also very disorienting.
Yes. What's interesting is that all of these writing systems, even the ones that are super, super foreign, not all of them, but most of them have the same origin, which is in the writing system of ancient Egypt, the hieroglyphic system, Egyptian hieroglyphs. And it's strange how one system can give rise to all of these different expressions, all of these different ways of writing that look nothing like one another. Unless you're looking at ones that have diverged very recently, like, say, the Greek alphabet and the Latin alphabet. And nevertheless, these are relatives.
Yeah. Yeah. And if once you learn some of them, that, like, it's sometimes you just have to learn that kind of basic part, and then you are able to build and build and build and build. But until you do take the time to learn that, then you're kind of at sea. I was, for a short period of time, I was in a master's program that was an English program that led me into media studies, but everyone had to take, or was like on the road to having to take Old English. And there was this feeling of like dread. And I think that it was because people had maybe taken some medieval lit and struggled in it, but then they took Old English, and it was like opening a world. It was like a whole door of new things that they could appreciate. So can you talk a little bit about how that happens in the classroom, like how you're able to appreciate these texts more once you have more familiarity with the language?
It's really an interesting thing. Old English, when you first have a look at it, the first experience is, what is this? This is not English.
Right.
You see all sorts of crazy endings. The words look different, different symbols here and there. But then if you get into it a bit, then the second layer of that is, oh, actually, wait a second. I see a lot of similarities here. So what's the word for house? Hus. Oh, okay. I see where you're coming from. What's the word for hand? Hond. Okay. And then it seems, oh, I can domesticate this. I can make this my own. This is not so different from my language. And then you get farther in and you realize, oh yeah, actually it is. And so it's this push and pull that you have of the strange and the familiar. And this is what I think is the fascination of Old English, because it's right on the border. It's totally right on the border of, I feel like this is still English, but it's really not at the same time. Right. And it becomes important if you want... if you have literary interest, if you're interested in reading early medieval literature, going through translation is always an option, but the problem is the stuff that most people want to read is the hardest to translate.
Really?
So the classic example is Beowulf.
Yeah.
So the poem that everyone knows about, if they know anything about Old English literature, is Beowulf. And Justly Famous is probably the only Old English poem that has movie adaptations.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know. Although some of the Exeter book riddles I think could work, but when you read the poem in translation, you end up having to, or say, I'll approach it from the translator's perspective. You have to make a lot of decisions, and you have to decide, how much am I going to accommodate this to the way of the mode of expression in modern English, and how much do I want to keep it sort of strange and foreign?
Right.
And because the distance between the two languages is, relatively speaking, great, you have to make decisions that will close off some possibilities of interpretation. Mm-hmm. You have to make some of the decisions for the reader as a translator. Whereas with if you read it in Old English, you don't. You don't have to have those decisions made for you. You can make them yourself.
Yeah.
And you can have, there are often, and this happens all the time in Beowulf, there are cases where there are two ways of interpreting a particular passage. And it actually does end up mattering, who hit whom. It's in battle scenes. And I suppose it's appropriate, when you see the rough chaos of a battle, you don't necessarily know who's hitting whom. Yeah. And the experience of reading the battle scenes in Beowulf is like that. It's like, he hit him and he hit this. Like, who are you talking about? I somewhat think the poet intended that.
Yeah.
But the translator will have to often make a decision who hit whom.
Yeah.
Whereas there really isn't enough information in the Old English to do that. So you will read in translation, you'll think you know what's going on.
Yeah.
And then if you ever end up reading in Old English, you realize, oh no, I actually didn't know entirely what was going on. I had one person's opinion.
Yeah. No, that's so smart and interesting. It gives you you have to be much more open to some of that ambivalence or liminality in terms of what the actual meaning is. Whereas I think sometimes when you're trying to be so precise with the translation, I'm thinking of some very contemporary translations of the New Testament that are trying to use very 2000s language to be like Jesus's voice, right? And it makes it so direct and so in the parlance of the time that it doesn't leave a lot of room for interpretation, right? It's too comfortable almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, we have so many good questions. We have a lot of nerds in our audience, and I appreciate all of them. And some of them are kind of more grammatical, and some of them are about specific weird words. People were very excited to learn that we were having you on. So, first question comes from Faye, and Melody's going to read it.
What do you mean it's raining? It is raining. What is it?
This happens in French too, I've noticed. So what do you think?
I hear the passion in that question, which I really love. What is it? It is raining. So this is a quirk of English and of some other languages. Mm-hmm. But many languages don't share this quirk, which is that the English language requires every verb to have a subject.
Yeah.
So to rephrase that, whenever you have an action, you have to say who's doing it. You can't, for example, say goes. Mm-hmm. Who goes? He goes, she goes, who goes? You have to say who goes. But many languages don't require you to do that. So perhaps listeners will have had experience studying Spanish as an example of a language which doesn't require you to say who goes if it's clear from the context. Mm-hmm. But when you think about raining, it is raining. What is it? There is nothing that's it. Mm-hmm. It is reality itself.
Yeah.
It is the universe. I don't know what it is.
The universe is raining.
Rain is. That's it. And there's nothing in particular that's raining. It's just occurring. And so this is the kind of verb or verb phrase that we would call impersonal, mm-hmm. because it doesn't have a person or thing doing it. It's just happening. Yeah. So the fact that English requires you to have a subject for every verb necessitates that something go there, and we don't want to say much about what's raining because there really isn't anything. So we put this dummy pronoun in, which is it. Mm-hmm. Although interestingly, it wasn't always so. In Old English, you didn't absolutely need an it-style pronoun when you're talking about things like raining or snowing. But this developed over the later Middle Ages, and it got to the point where English really fossilized this restriction or this requirement that every sentence, every verb should have a subject. And then after that, the die was cast. It is raining.
That it makes me think of sometimes when I'm editing my own work or editing someone else's work, or when I was grading papers, and I would often ask them at the beginning of a paragraph to say, please restate what the antecedent is here. What is it? Because sometimes it might be clear in your head what it is, right? And it's clear in all of our heads what it is. But we could say the sky is raining, even though that's imprecise too. Is it it's an example of something, it's an example. This is an example of the actual subject itself is somewhat imprecise, like the cloud is raining, the sky is sunny.
I think it's that the subject kind of doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Because if you say the cloud is or the sky is sunny, it means the same thing more or less, but it's not exactly the same thing.
No.
It's sunny you're not specifically referring to the sky. You're referring to the situation in general.
Yeah.
And there's really no word that you can substitute for it that will have that same effect.
Right.
It's just a formal quirk of English
Yeah.
that requires you to have this little it here. It's very strange. Not every language does it, but English does.
The Culture Study podcast is sponsored by Ollie. It is officially the month of love, and you know that you want to celebrate with the one you love the most, your dog. I was just writing my will. There's like an actual part where it says, if you have dogs, who's going to care for them? And I set aside enough money so that if they want, they can have Ollie every day for the rest of their lives, because I know that would be the greatest gift that I could give them. You don't have to be writing your will to give your dog the best, highest quality ingredients with Ollie. And yes, it's the kind of meal that dogs actually get excited about, like jumping up and down, making like the most amazing sounds in the whole world. Like that is the Ollie love. These are human grade recipes backed by vet nutritionists and crafted with culinary experts. Dogs absolutely love them. If your dog's going through a picky phase, if you just want to really treat them, they will love it so much. Also, they make tailored meal plans to meet your dog's specific needs with perfectly portioned meals and mess-free packaging, so you don't have the gross tin can just hanging out in your fridge. Disgusting. It comes with this very cute scoop and this very cute little box for easy serving. The Ollie app also offers on-demand health screenings where you can tap real experts for pup peace of mind. So this month, celebrate your number one Valentine, your greatest love, your dog. Head to ollie.com/culture, tell them all about your dog, and use code CULTURE to get 60% off your welcome kit when you subscribe today. Plus, they offer a happiness guarantee on the first box, so if you're not completely satisfied, you'll get your money back. That's OLLIE.com/culture and enter code CULTURE to get 60% off your first box. Today's episode is sponsored by Wild Alaskan Company. Melody, have you made anything with Wild Alaskan lately?
You know, I haven't, but Bobby has been on a roll.
What did he do?
He has made two things that were just delectable. One was a seafood stew. The other thing he made is a dish that we had in Iceland that changed our lives called pluckfisker. And traditionally, it's one of those like use up stuff in your fridge casserole type, but we had like an elevated version of it at a restaurant. But think of like gourmet tuna casserole, but with the Pacific cod and potatoes and lots of cheese. And
Yum.
it's just like it sticks to your ribs.
Yum.
It's so good.
A perfect February meal. Mm-hmm. So if you want to replicate these, Wild Alaskan Company is the best way to get wild-caught, perfectly portioned, nutrient-dense seafood delivered directly to your door. It's 100% wild-caught and never farmed. It's nutrient-rich and full of flavor. It's frozen off the boat to lock in taste, texture, and nutrients like omega-3s. And it's wild-caught from Alaska, so every order supports sustainable harvesting practices. And your membership delivers flexible shipments, expert tips, and truly feel-good seafood. If you're not completely satisfied with your first box, Wild Alaskan Company will give you a full refund. No questions asked, no risk, just high-quality seafood. Not all fish are the same. Get seafood you can trust. Go to wildalaskan.com/culture for $35 off your first box of premium wild-caught seafood. That's wildalaskan.com/culture for $35 off your first order. Thanks to Wild Alaskan Company for sponsoring this episode. Next question is so in your wheelhouse. I just read a piece where you get into some of this. So this question comes from Andrea.
Why are the letters GH pronounced as an F, like in the words cough or laugh or tough?
But also it's silent sometimes.
GH is the great shame of the English spelling system. I once described this in particular as a cruel joke. You have words like daughter and laughter, right, where you have GH silent or pronounced as F, and you get things like through and night, and it's chaotic. Yeah. What happened is that this spelling actually does make sense as long as you are in the year 1300.
Yes,
So
great.
this. Unfortunately, we're not in the year 1300. Things have changed since then. So there actually used to be a sound that GH represented. It's this sound that you get in the German, in the name of the composer Bach.
Yeah.
I don't know if that always comes through over the mic, but it's this
Yeah.
harsh kind of sound made in the hard palate at the back of the mouth. And this used to be a part of English, but with time, that sound dropped out around the year 1400. And we can tell this because people used to write it really consistently. Well, as consistently as people wrote anything in the Middle Ages, which is not super consistently, but
Yes.
actually the word through has over 200 spellings in the sort of later Middle Ages. So yikes.
That made me laugh so hard I just wheezed. Okay, keep going.
Seriously, some of them are very strange. But around 1400, you start seeing people making strange kind of what we might think of as mistakes. They weren't mistakes, but they started becoming confused about what words had GH and what words didn't. So people started writing a word like night, as in not day, but night. They wrote it NYTE in some cases. Whereas before, they were very careful always to put a GH or something that looked a little like that in that position. And so this indicates that people perhaps didn't make a difference between the word that would have formerly sounded something like nicht, that would, not day, but nicht.
Yes.
And a word like, well, actually, we don't have another word that's like that, but if there were a word NITE in modern English.
Yeah.
So the distinction between nicht and something like neat became collapsed, and they lost that sound. And then you also see people starting to add GH to words that never had them. So a word that was pronounced delete becomes delight in modern English, but it comes from French.
Right.
It gets spelled with a GH because people didn't know. They knew that the GH is used in some words, and it seems to be kind of random where because they don't say any of those GHs. So they just guessed. And sometimes they guessed wrong. Yeah, they just added it. This happens a lot. They just added it, and we're stuck with it. So now we have delight looking like it has something to do with light, but it doesn't.
How much did this have to do with the fact that, like, because printing presses and because just like moving text around was so limited and like oftentimes just by hand, they're just you weren't surrounded by that many examples, so you often had to guess.
Yeah, in terms of the spelling, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We don't get the printing press in England until 1476.
Right.
So for all of the history of English before then, we don't have printing. We have manuscript copying by hand.
Yeah.
And not a great deal of literacy in general. So yeah, you get this lack of a check. Literacy and widespread mass media, say printing presses and newspapers and things like that, can act as a bit of a check on change because it gives people a constant reminder of how things are spelled by others.
Yeah.
And later we get this ideology that there are proper ways to spell things and each word has one spelling, which enters in sort of a little bit later after the printing press. So it's crazy. But the thing is, not every person in England lost that sound at the same time. Some lost it later than others in different dialects.
Yeah.
And some people moved that sound that at the back of the throat to an equivalent sound made at the front of the mouth with the lips, the F sound, like f. Because if you are just closing your eyes, and everyone will be able to do this really easily because it's a podcast, the h and f sound are not super acoustically different.
Yeah.
They become more obviously different when you can see people's lips and things like that, but acoustically they're not super different. And so sometimes you get sort of flow between one and the other. And what happened for those dialects is that back of the mouth sound became an F. And that's where you get things like laugh. All those people start to flood into London as the city grows and history takes its course and people industrialization and things like this. So you get people all mixing around in London. Actually, this predates industrialization. This is, I think, more due to the sort of Black Death leveling things out and getting rid of so much of the population of London and people having to come. The city has to really find new people. and opportunities are knocking and people from the countryside come to London. So you get this huge increase in population, but a lot of people from different places. And they're all sort of mixing and mingling. And as a result, the English that we speak today is a descendant of this London dialect in the sort of later Middle Ages, early modern period. And some of the people, they had their pronunciation of GH in some words and some had another pronunciation. So what happens is that what we call English today is a bit of a mishmash. And so we have GH being F in some words and silent in others. And that's what we're stuck with.
Okay, I have another toughie for you. This one comes from Bridget.
What the fuck is with the word yacht? Which just took me 3 tries to spell, and my phone had no idea what word I was trying to spell correctly.
Oh, yeah. What is with that? So we have this really weird spelling that we don't have anywhere else in English where yacht, is spelled ACH. What's going on there? Well, it's important to look at the period in time in which this word comes into the English language, because this is actually not a word that originated in the English language. This is a loan word that comes in from Dutch. Wow. And it comes in the 16th century. So after the period where this ch sound has fallen out of the language for the most part. Why is this relevant? Because it comes from Dutch, which does have that kind of sound. I'm no Dutch speaker, but we had something like jacht or jachte for this type of ship, which means a hunting ship, a ship that moves quickly and can hunt other ships, presumably. But when that sound comes into English, people, don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to spell it. So they just sort of randomly type some, or not type at the time, but randomly write some things or print some things. Yes. And as a result, if you look in the Oxford English Dictionary, you will see tons of different spellings of this. You'll see even things like YATCH.
Yes.
Yatch.
Yes.
Which, I mean, I think a lot of us who want to spell that word yacht can we can empathize with that, because we're like, okay, what's going on there? And this is essentially a word that we don't know how to pronounce, we don't know how to spell, so we do our best with the spelling, and we just forget about that sound in the pronunciation.
Yeah.
So yacht, YACHT, why not?
Yeah. No, that makes sense to me. Sometimes when there's a word like similar, when it hits my brain, I do definitely just like throw some consonants at the keyboard, and then it won't, like, if the spell check doesn't catch it, then I try to Google it, and then it's like, oh yeah, there we go. But when you didn't have Google or you didn't have spell check, you just threw some consonants and then understood that people would like figure out what you were talking about.
Exactly.
Yatch. Maybe I'm going to start calling it that. The Culture Study Podcast is sponsored by Blissy. My hair sometimes, I don't know, like I don't wash it every day. I'm not like the best steward of my hair. But I didn't realize that part of the reason that sometimes it's like all frizzy and like where I have like the embarrassing sleep creases on my face when I wake up in the morning, it's because I was sleeping with cotton sheets. Now, everyone in our family, aka me, the dogs, and Charlie, fight over who gets to use the Blissy pillowcase when we fall asleep, because it's the smoothest, the coolest, and the least likely to make your hair frizzy. I don't think the dogs care as much, but I certainly do. It also gives you healthier skin in weeks because it does not keep all of the gross dirt and germs that a cotton pillowcase that your dog sleeps all over necessarily gets. It reduces fine lines, wrinkles, and sleep creases and helps prevent breakouts. Blissy pillowcases are made of the highest quality silk. It's naturally cooling, it's breathable, it's hydrating, and it's hypoallergenic. Blissy pillowcases are also dermatologist tested and recommended. They're fully machine washable and available in 100 different colors. Oh, and also, Melody, do you know that you can get a matching scrunchie?
What?
I know.
I have the matching sleep mask,
Same.
but
We need the scrunchie.
I love a scrunchie. Yeah.
Dear Blissy, send us the scrunchies. Because you're a listener, Blissy is offering 60 nights risk-free plus an additional 30% off when you shop at blissy.com/culturepod. That's BLISSY.com/culturepod and use code culturepod to get an additional 30% off. Your skin and hair will thank you. Today's episode is sponsored by Blueland. So when I became a homeowner with more than one bathroom, to be clear, I only have two, but I was like, I need to buy soap dispensers for every single bathroom and also for my kitchen. And then I kept like convincing myself when one would get low that, oh, like now I need to buy other ones or I'd like buy a huge pack from Costco. And you're wasting so much plastic. And I realized this with like so many other cleaning products as well, that like if you replace the entire thing every time you get low, you are putting so much plastic into your recycling bin, which oftentimes actually means the landfill. What I love about Blissy is they give you really sturdy containers. So some of them are like the spray bottles. Some of them are places where you keep all of the tablets to use to clean your toilet bowl, or the soaps. Like I love the soaps. They give you those containers, and then instead of buying new plastic over and over again for the rest of your life, they send you replacement tabs that you mix with water, and that makes your cleaner for you. It's amazing. I made the switch to Blueland across all cleaning products in my home, especially right now at the start of the year when I'm rethinking routines and trying to build more sustainable habits. Certified by Cradle to Cradle, Blueland products meet the highest standard of clean. They're effective yet gentle on people and the planet. We're talking about cleaning sprays and toilet bowl cleaner, but we're also talking about dishwasher and laundry detergent tablets. All of these products from Blueland are 100% microplastic free, EPA Safer Choice certified formulas that are safe to use around my house, my pets, my plants. I love not having to choose between the safe option and what actually gets my house clean. Right now, Blueland has a special offer for listeners. Get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/culture. You won't want to miss this. Blueland.com/culture for 15% off. That's blueland.com/culture to get 15% off. Next submission has 2 questions, so we're going to break them up into 2 and answer them individually. These come from Kristen.
What's the deal with weird? Why do we spell it that way? It does not follow the I before E rule. You know, I before E except after C, or sounding in A as neighbor and way. Why is weird so weird?
So weird is a weird word. This is a bit of a convoluted history, and there are actually still some mysterious aspects to the spelling and pronunciation and meaning of the word weird. Originally, it dates back to an Old English word, which is spelled W-Y-R-D, weird, which means fate or destiny, something like that. And it's really a noun form of a verb that means to become or to happen. So It's literally that which happens, this sort of becoming itself. That's fate, that's destiny. And it's very important in Old English poetry. Poets are always talking about how inexorable fate is, or fate always does what it must do. It's, very kind of sort of harsh and windswept reality that those poets are inhabiting, and they talk about fate a lot. For whatever reason, in the later Middle Ages, after you get the Norman conquest, which, if that's not familiar to any listeners, it's in 1066.
Guillaume le Conquérant.
Right.
William the Conqueror arrives. The weird fact that I know from French history. Yes, keep going.
He comes over to England, not on holiday, but to, as the name might suggest, conquer. And he ends up taking the English throne and bringing a bunch of his French-speaking buddies over and forming the new aristocracy. As a result, the English language doesn't go totally underground, but from a literary perspective, it's replaced by French as the language of administration and high culture in England for a few centuries.
Yeah.
And we get a lot fewer texts written in English. And during that time, the English language morphs a lot. And when it finally comes back a few hundred years later, approaching the era of Chaucer, it looks a lot different because it's had a few centuries away from the halls of power, away from being written down. And so everyone was, writing and speaking how they wanted, because there was really no one to say, don't. They were just doing it for themselves for the most part. So when you get to the time of Chaucer, this is the late 14th century, then English reemerges as a literary language. Why do I mention this? Because weird is one of those words that sort of we lose track of during that period.
Yeah.
It seems, however, it's not that there was no English literature. So we do have some examples. It seems particularly associated with Northern English and Scottish sources. And it continues this meaning fate, but it ends up being spelled W-E-I-R-D, which is a Scottish spelling convention for this vowel it was probably pronounced at the time something like weird, with this A, which is itself kind of interesting because it suggests that the word came from the very, very southeastern part of England, Kent, and then migrated to Scotland in some way. This is where the mystery is, because the vowel is from the south, the spelling's from the north, and all of our texts are from the north. Well, something happened. We don't know what it was, but it ends up in Scots as weird with the spelling W-E-I-R-D. Then that A vowel turns into E, so we get weird. That's why it's spelled strangely, because it's a Scots convention.
Yeah.
Why do we keep it?
Right.
Because of Shakespeare, more or less. So in Scottish literature, they talk about the weird sisters, who are the Fates.
Yes.
And because Shakespeare is working with Scottish material to write the play Macbeth, obviously, what other kind of material would you want? It is the Scottish play. You get this literal rendering of the Scots word weird into English as the weird sisters, who are the witches in Macbeth. Then people sort of, I wouldn't say misinterpret, but they reinterpret what weird sisters means. Because really what weird sisters meant at the time was the sisters of fate, the sisters who controlled destiny. But they were a bit weird as well. They were a bit strange and uncanny.
Right.
And so you get this secondary meaning of weird, which is having to do with the supernatural, strange, uncanny, foreign, weird. And that's where we get the modern usage of the word weird from.
Amazing. I love it. Okay. Second question. I feel like that's going to, people are going to hear that and they're never going to think of that word the same way again. Let's hear Kristen's second question.
Why don't we say more countries and cities the way the people who are from there do? Apparently no one from that region has ever called the city Rome, not in Italian or Latin. They say Roma, which is not difficult for English speakers. I understand when different languages, it's harder to make certain sounds, but what gives when it isn't? Okay.
This is a really cool question because it also has to do with history. As most of these questions have historical answers. In this case, we originally did say it like they said it, and then English changed. So these names of cities that we say differently, for the most part, are names that were borrowed into English at a much earlier phase of the language. Then English changed, and we just kept saying it the way we've always said it. At least so we imagine, but from one generation to the next, it changes slightly.
Right.
And we just imagine, we're just saying how we've always said it. Don't they say Rome? My parents and their grandparents, and they always said Rome. Actually, some of them said something like Roma in older English. But nevertheless, now we end up having Rome. We don't have the memory that it changed, but we took it from the way that they would have said it at the time. So it's just, we actually do say it like the people there said it, but then 2,000 years of history or whatever have elapsed.
So this works in a condensed way, like with place names in the United States, say, right? With at some point someone said it's similar to that, and then it just kind of changes over time in how people pronounce it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So in Idaho, there are a number of different place names that are pronounced, that are French from the French trappers and that sort of thing. But then they've been slightly altered. So there's a town called Coeur d'Alene, which in some places might be where you pronounce every single vowel, right? You'd say Coeur d'Alene or something like that. And because you see that in different parts of the United States where the French has just been turned into English.
With English and French, there's a bit of a history. And so there are, English speakers are very aware of what sounds French because of the two languages' long coexistence, long and somewhat uncomfortable coexistence.
Yes.
Going back to the age of the Norman conquest. So what happens, now there may be some specific details about particular cases, but I think in general, what we can say is that there's precedent for how to anglicize French words.
Yes.
Because we have so much of the English language is anglicized French words.
Yes.
And some of these words come from 1,000 years ago, like people, as an example. People has been well and truly anglicized to the point that it's very hard to recognize it as originally a French word.
Yep.
But you have words that have come more recently that wear their French on their sleeve a bit more. And then it becomes a sort of a social thing to say, how French do I want to say this? What am I signaling about myself as someone who, I know how things are pronounced in French, or I don't care how things are pronounced in French. This is an English word.
Right.
These kinds of factors come in. And there is a lot of controversy in the sort of 1700s thereabouts about excessive use of French in English, and people getting a bit fancy and using French too much. This ends up being a controversy that gets mostly resolved so that we now generally tend to take French words into the English language in recent years, more or less preserving the French pronunciation modulo what we're capable of as speakers of English.
Yes.
Croissant, as an example, rather than croissant or whatever it might be. But that ideology wasn't always there. And it's not even always there in all speakers of English today. So you get these different options of how to pronounce French. And I think that's what's going on with these place names.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think there would be a very complicated and interesting history of pronunciation if you could because we can track how a place was spelled, right, on maps and that sort of thing. But it's much harder to figure out how every 10 years how people pronounce that place name, right? We just don't have those sorts of recordings available to us.
And there's also the fact that French has changed too. So a lot of the times, the pronunciation, especially in the French colonization of the Americas, this is pre-French Revolution.
Yeah.
And a lot of linguistic changes happened with the revolution and as a result. And so you get things like the pronunciation of the OI sequence, which is now wa, but which was originally earlier something like we, and earlier still oi, which makes sense because it's OI, right? Actually, even French spelling has logic, believe it or not. You just have to go back far enough. That's usually true of writing systems. There is logic if you understand when the writing system was sort of fossilized. It makes sense then.
Right. And then you can just go backwards. Okay. So this one, I can't wait for your answer on this one. This question comes from Alexa.
I saw a post once that pondered words like cutthroat, turncoat, pickpocket, or maybe my favorite, lickspittle. These words are flipped from a normal convention of verb-noun-er construction, like firefighter or peacekeeper. And, coincidentally, most of these words are insults. I'd love to hear more about this.
So this is I love this question. This is a really interesting, one because it's something that is actively being researched now.
Wow.
There are 2025 citations about this topic. There are citations from 2025 about it. And they're called sometimes pickpocket or turncoat compounds. And they're not sort of native to the English language. They come from French influence. They first actually appear in French, and in fact, French has a ton of them.
Yes, it does.
This is the Romance languages in general have a ton of them, but especially French. I'm thinking like casse-tête, like a puzzle, a breakhead.
Breakhead, yeah.
So this is a thing that originated seemingly in the Romance languages, probably in French, fairly early. Maybe something like 11th century in French, I think they start to show up. Although there's some talk that there may have been earlier versions. You can see certain people's names look like they might, in very, very early texts, be these kinds of compounds. But they come from French into English. They're always sort of marginal in English. They never become an extremely well-used device.
Yeah.
And they, even in French, they tend to be used in the earliest texts for people. And they tend to be kind of playful. So even from the beginning, they have this quality that they end up having in modern English. But they're un-English in their structure. The Old English way of forming these compounds is just like the more typical modern English firefighter way. So you have, actually, Lucifer, of all people, is referred to as lichtberend. In Old English, light bearer, right? It's a literal translation of Lucifer. in, theological discussions. And this is the typical way of forming these compounds in Old English. You only see them you only see the opposite, the pickpocket turncoat style, in the 13th or 14th century. And they tend to be insults. And the reason for this is a bit mysterious, but it may be because they are so uncommon that they are eye or ear catching. And they have that bit of creativity. A good insult should be creative.
Yes.
If you're trying to insult someone, if you just say, "Oh, you jerk," okay, I'm not really insulted. But if you've taken the time to craft something that shows sort of an artisan level of insult, that's a better insult. That's more biting. And I think that may have something to do with why these survive as insults, because they're the less common option. But they are strange. And what's really strange about them is that most compounds contain the thing or how to put this in a clearer way. Think of a compound like school bus.
Yeah.
It's a bus, fundamentally.
Yeah.
Or firefighter. It's a fighter, fundamentally. What kind of fighter? A fighter of fires. What kind of bus? A bus to do with school.
Yes.
But a pickpocket is not a pocket.
Yes.
This is kind of odd, right? A pickpocket is not a pocket. A turncoat is not a coat. So these are what are called exocentric compounds, and that the thing they refer to is outside of the compound itself. And this is not something that's particularly common in English. Saber tooth is another good example. Not quite the same, but it's also exocentric.
Yeah.
And so perhaps all these factors go into making it kind of a marginal thing, but sometimes the marginal things have their place.
Can I tell you a quick theory and you can totally shut it down? So I think that these were used in French as insults or swear words by people who maybe spoke French in English contexts. And then at some point someone translated them but still then used them as the insult, right? You used it, you still used this great word the same way that I don't know, I feel like we use swear words in other languages or various I don't know, sometimes I say merde, right? I say words in different languages because it softens the curse word or makes it into a secret language almost, right?
Yes.
So
I remember, and the details are escaping, but I remember a study where people were putting their hands in ice water and they were allowed to swear, and they could do it for longer if they were allowed to swear. But I wonder if it would be the same if you were swearing in a second language, because it doesn't seem real. You don't have those the prohibited words that we weren't allowed to say as kids. There's still, even as adults, there's a little bit of a cool aspect of saying them, but. In some other language, you never had that experience of being forbidden from saying these. You just know that, this means something bad, and it doesn't have much of an emotional charge. So I think there might be something like that going on as well.
My secondary theory is that these were used in mysteries, cutthroat and turncoat, both they feel like something that you would use in an actual mystery novel, and that more literary people are I'm going to use this clever word from French and put it into the text. It's almost like a flourish.
And this is actually something that might be coloring our understanding of the history of these phrases, is the relationship to literature.
Yeah.
Because they are so colorful. And if you look at early texts, they tend not to be that colorful. Earlier texts tend not to be that colorful. Fiction is something that is, well, arguably, people will get into fist fights at conferences over when, what the first novel was. But, something like Robinson Crusoe is a typical guess or opinion. Relatively late in the history, 18th century. The heyday of these compounds is earlier. These really start to decline after the 15th century, and very, very few get created in modern times. Scofflaw is, I think, the only one that was coined in the 20th century.
Huh.
So in those earlier texts, when it had its heyday, maybe it was super popular, but not in the kind of text that people wrote. People wrote more, highbrow, philosophical, theological, scientific texts in English.
Yeah. Okay, this is great, because this is the segue I was going to take. Was I did an interview with the author of this great book about the proliferation of Wound Man, which I'm sure you're familiar with and we'll link to in the show notes, like how wound man showed up in all of these different texts over the course of the Middle Ages, and how a lot of like the spellings and the language that's used during the time he's talking about, both it's in the actual documentation of the wound man, which is a depiction of a man who has been like basically like has had all means of injury visited upon him. And it's a way that like they learned that people transmitted information about how the body worked and how the body was injured and how pain was experienced. But also part of the way that they learned this, how people were talking about it, was through court cases. And I don't know if we always think about that like, oh, part of the way that English was written, or one of the primary ways that English was written, was in documentation of like legal cases against one another. So interesting.
And even that only starts at sort of in the later, towards the very end of the Middle Ages, when you're allowed to the Pleading in English Act, I think it's called, where you're allowed to use English in court, which prior to that was all French, which is why a lot of legal English is French. It looks very French because when they suddenly started
all those sorts of things. Yeah.
Exactly. When they suddenly started to be able to plead in English, they didn't have words for all these things. So let's use the French ones. That's why we have things like defendant, plaintiff.
Defender. Yeah. Plaintiff. Wow. Okay, sorry, you're just taking me down so many different places. We clearly need another episode. Last question, though, I think. Melody sent me this yesterday and was like, we need to add this because this is a great way to end the episode. This comes from Erin.
One of my early memories as a child is of my dad telling me not to say ain't because it sounded ignorant. In middle school, my best friend's dad would mercilessly tease one of our other friends for using like as a filler word. The unstated message was clear. The way that you speak advertises your class, your race, and your education level, and you'd better make sure that you're signaling you're belonging to the right group. But language is always changing. There are things that my children say that set my teeth on edge because they sound wrong to me, but which seem totally normal to them. As the kids would say, it hits different depending on when and where you were born. Are there any words, phrases, or grammatical constructions commonly used today that you predict will cease to be considered quote-unquote bad English and will transition into standard usage? I'm thinking of filler words such as like, but also search it up, using less and fewer interchangeably, and saying me and Melody instead of Melody and I. And what are some features of the ways that we speak now that used to be considered déclassé or otherwise wrong?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, so yeah, the stuff that people disapprove of today, that I think is going to go mainstream, I think the number one, almost certainly, is the be like construction. And I'm like this, and he's like that, and they're like. I think that is going to be 100% mainstream in 100 years. I think it's going to be so mainstream that people won't even remember that there was a controversy about it.
Yeah.
There are lots of things like this that are very, 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 very normal for us, but they actually, if you go back in the Victorian books, people are fighting about it. So this segues into the second half of that of the question, which is mainstream stuff that used to be looked down upon.
Yeah.
And there's one that I learned. I remember learning. I can't believe this was a controversy. And the word is it's about the usage of a particular word, which is transpire. Huh. So we use transpire generally in day-to-day speech. If we use it at all, we mean to happen. It's a fancy way of saying happen. Oh, the events which transpired on that day. But if you look at the etymology of transpire, it consists of two parts. The trans, which is a Latin prefix, which means a cross. And then the spire, which is like respiration, inspiration, is about breathing. Yeah. So it literally means to breathe through. And when you look at the earliest texts, it means to pass through some sort of porous surface like a vapor might, to leak out.
That's how I understand it. That's so interesting.
When if you think of transpiration in a scientific sense, that's exactly what it means. Still.
Yeah. Okay.
But when people use it casually, they say, oh, the events which transpired. What transpired at that meeting? And how did we get from one to the other? Well, people used to metaphorically talk about secrets being let out. There was a secret meeting, but the event, the contents of that meeting transpired. They leaked out. They flowed out of that sealed room. And now everyone knows. But then people misunderstood what that meant. They thought the events which transpired at that meeting, it must mean the events that occurred at that meeting, but just in a fancy way. And so people started starting in the late 18th century to use transpire to mean happen. And people were very upset about this. They wrote, this is ludicrous. This is bad English. But Dickens used it. So, I mean, I don't know. Once Dickens uses it, you're sort of...
No, that's so interesting. Like, and it's always like with this like incredible rage or just like disappointment, right? That's how I think I receive emails sometimes. I don't get them as much as my partner, he writes for The Atlantic, and I will just say that his audience is a little bit older, and they are so much more angry about the use of like than I think our peers.
I've thought a lot about this because I also get similar things from time to time, and I appreciate all of them. They're all lovely because they indicate that people care about language, which is exactly what I'm all about.
It's a good reframe. Thank you for the reframe.
I try, but sometimes it's hard. But I was writing about this recently. I did a lot of research as to where the passion comes from. Why would we care what another person says if they use a word in a particular way? Oh, it's not like this, it should be like that. But okay, true, maybe, but why expend any energy correcting them? Where does that come from? And it seems to be wrapped up in this kind of anxiety about status that starts to emerge in the 18th century when people who were of a class that previously didn't have access to education suddenly did. They suddenly entered the middle class and were very worried that they would be sort of found out, that they don't belong because they don't have the education that the others have, and they have to, they're middle class, gotta have respectability and appearances to consider. And so they invested a lot of money and time in these books, which are how to use hard words. And these are the first dictionaries of English.
Yeah.
The first dictionaries of English don't include every word in the English language, only the hard ones. And some of these dictionaries are so horrible. I'm sorry, I'm sure they took a lot of work to create, but they create new words that you can use just to sound fancy.
What's an example?
And how they do this is they literally go, we don't use them anymore, most of these words, thank goodness. Yeah. But unmortalize. Unmortalized for to kill. Because you wouldn't want to say to kill like you're some sort of a peasant.
Well, and that's kind of like on Instagram, right? Where you can't say some of these words. So people are coming up with words like unalive that sound ridiculous, different function in some ways, right?
But the exact same structure.
Yes.
And what's sadder is, from one perspective at least, a lot of these words made it into the English language. And so not all of them did. And yes, they're all lovely. I love every word equally. But they had this origin in sort of motives that I wouldn't ascribe to myself. As I'm not so concerned about being found out because I live in the 21st century, and so do all of these people. But they seem to consider it a favor. I'm helping you out by letting you know that you've shown that you don't know what you're talking about. Right.
Basically, that you are a class driver.
And the history of the English language is full of this.
Yes.
So in this sense, you understand that this is just a process that's been going on for many centuries, and you're just a part of it. You're just in that milieu.
Well, and the difficult thing too is that I think people do it in a more subtle way by using words that they think other people will not know. Like this is a way of establishing.
A little pause afterwards.
Like, do you know that one? Yeah. Do you know that one? Or like you just said milieu, right? Like how do you pronounce milieu? Like do you say it the actual way that you're supposed to? Or what do you think about contractions? Weren't they kind of gauche?
Yeah. Certainly not appropriate in writing for a long time, even well into the 20th century. It's only in the late 20th century when you start to see contractions used in formal-ish writing, like in journalism or that kind of thing. Yeah. But it was definitely looked at as improper in some sense or not appropriate. And yet I dare say contractions at this point are completely without controversy in almost all situations. There are probably some exceptions in like school essays and things like that, but
not ain't.
But not ain't. Well, ain't's a special one. Ain't's a really interesting one because it actually fulfills a very useful function. What's the contracted, negated form of am? We don't have one.
No.
I am. If you
opposite way.
He is, isn't he?
Yes.
They are, aren't they? I am, aren't I? Oh, what? What's going on there?
Wrong.
That's where ain't should be.
Yeah.
But because of history, we've it's been a proscribed form. It's been looked down upon for a long time, even though it has, if you were going from the sort of logic of the structure of the system, it would belong right there.
Oh, my last question was that I think that I have a similar response when I would be grading like a 10th grader's essay, and it was so clear that they had used the thesaurus tool. And I was like, that word doesn't mean what you think it means. And if you use it in this way, it's going to make you look silly. But it's the same impulse as someone who's 70 emailing me to say you use like too much. It's supposed to be compassionate.
None of us is without nitpicking. And it's funny because linguists have a reputation as endorsing descriptive attitudes towards language as opposed to prescriptive attitudes.
Yeah.
However, if you are a linguist and you submit a paper to a journal with creative spellings, you see how far that extends, right?
That is a great place for us to end. So I'm just going to say to everyone, you must subscribe to Colin's newsletter. Can you tell us about it and where people can find it?
Yeah, it's called the Dead Language Society, and it's at deadlanguagesociety.com, also on Substack. And we basically every week look at another one of these strange sort of stories. It's a weird word, a quirk of the history of English spelling, some historical event that's had linguistic consequences. We basically dive backwards through the history of the English language and uncover all the fun stuff.
One of my recent faves is the history of the word dog, so you can look forward to that. Thank you so much for joining me. This was such a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Culture Study Podcast. Today, paid subscribers got a very fascinating bonus segment where I answer a listener's question about how religious my upbringing was. If you want to get that bonus content, join the crew of paid subscribers at patreon.com/culturestudy. Paid subscribers get ad-free episodes, private discussion threads, bonus content in every single episode, plus whole bonus episodes every now and then. We have one in the works about the new Wuthering Heights movie, so you definitely don't want to miss it. Again, it's patreon.com/culturestudy to sign up. Also, there are 4 ways to support the show that don't cost any money. You can send it to a friend, post it on social media, follow it in your podcast app, or please leave a nice review in the app. Word of mouth is still the #1 way that people find new podcasts, so it really, really helps us out when you spread the word. And as always, if you want to suggest a topic, ask a question about the culture that surrounds you, or submit a question for our subscriber-only advice time segment, go to our Google form at tinyurl.com/culturestudypod, or check the show notes for a link. The Culture Study Podcast is produced by me, Anne-Helen Petersen, and Melody Rowell. Our music is by Poddington Bear. You can find me on Instagram at Anne-Helen Petersen, Melody at Melodious47, and the show at Culture Study Pod.